Happy Friday. We're working on a quorum. But hopefully when they hear my voice, they're able to start rattling. The hour of convening has arrived, and the Senate will come to order on this glorious sunny Friday. At this time, I'd like to ask that all unauthorized persons exit the chamber. I'd like to recognize a gentleman from historic Crawfish Springs.
Mr. President, have you been there? It's a beautiful day in our neighborhood and also here at the state capitol. A couple of things to note. In 1874, the senator from the 50th from Toccoa told me that Governor James Smith signed legislation that created the Department of Agriculture. That long ago is the first such agency in the nation. Also, the senator from Ocilla, the 7th, told me it's his favorite day to celebrate. It's National Tooth Fairy Day. Mr. President, the journal's been read and found to be correct.
I'm so proud at how much time you spent preparing for today. Is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal? The chair hears none, and the reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions, please bring them to the secretary's desk at this time. Mr. Secretary, first reading of Senate bills and resolutions, please.
Senate Bill 454 by Senator Beach of the 21st. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 13 of Chapter 2 of Title 26 of the OCGA relating to food service establishments so as to provide for mobile food service units that provide food for pickup and delivery via smartphone.
Regulated industries.
Senate Bill 455 by Senator Beach of the 21st. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 1 of the OCGA relating to primaries and elections generally so as to provide that person 17 years of age may register. Senate Bill 456 by Senator Harrell of the 40th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to post-secondary education so as to provide that tuition, fees, and other charges for part-time students of the university system of Georgia.
Higher education.
Senate Bill 457 by Senators Orrick of the 36th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to post-secondary education so as to provide for a fee waiver for students who serve full-time. Senate Bill 458 by Senator Tippins of the 37th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 14 of Title 40 of the OCGA relating to the use of speed detection devices and red light cameras to provide for the use and speed detection devices by law enforcement officers.
Public safety.
Senate Bill 459 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Titles 46 and 50 of the OCGA relating to public utilities and public transportation and state government respectfully so as to provide funding for the deployment of certain communication services.
Regulated industries.
Senate Bill 460 by Senator Miller of the 49th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 60 of Title 36 of the OCGA relating to general provisions applicable to counties and municipal corporations so as to provide for the regulatory.
Public safety.
Senate Bill 461 by Senator Anderson of the 24th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 12 of Title 2 of the OCGA relating to soil amendments so as to authorize
natural resources.
Senate Resolution 844 by Senator Miller of the 49th and others. A resolution honoring the life of Deputy Nicholas Blaine Dixon and dedicating a bridge in his memory and for other purposes.
Transportation.
Back, please, order, Mr. President.
First reading of House bills and resolutions, please.
House Bill 808 by Representative Momtahan of the 17th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 5C of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to alternative ad valorem taxes on motor vehicles.
Finance.
House Bill 838 by Representative Hitchens of the 161st and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Code Section 245510 of the Article 8 of Chapter 2 of Title 35 of the OCGA.
Public safety.
House Bill 846 by Representative Corbett of the 174th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 48 of the OCGA relating to revenue and taxation so as to provide that interest paid on
finance.
Please order, Mr. President.
Secretary will now read reports of standing committees.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor has had in consideration the following legislation and instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 327, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 408, due pass. Respectively submitted by Senator Jones of the 25th, Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration the following legislation and instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 357, due pass. Senate Bill 287, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 40, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 35, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 318, due pass by substitute. Respectively submitted by Senator Stone of the 23rd District, Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities has had in consideration the following legislation and is instructed to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 385, due passed by substitute. House Bill 337, due passed by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Cowsert of the 46th District, Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Governmental Operations has under consideration the following legislation and instructed me to report the same back to Senate with the following recommendation. House Bill 860, due pass. House Bill 874, due pass. House Bill 876, due pass. House Bill 871, due pass. House Bill 933, due pass. And Senate Bill 450, due pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Anderson of the 24th District, Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Urban Affairs has had in consideration the following legislation and instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 312, due pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Jackson, Chair. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Secretary will now read bills and resolutions for the second time.
Senate Bill 248 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others. Georgia Firefighters Pension Fund, monthly dues, tax on premiums, and maximum monthly benefit amount payable increase. Senate Bill 249 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others. Peace Officers Annuity and Benefit Fund, amount of monthly dues paid increase, amounts collected from fines revised. Senate Bill 271 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others. Law assistants rename as law clerks and staff attorneys. Senate Bill 278 by Senator Jackson II. Georgia Agricultural and Mechanical University System, create. Composition of the board and terms of office, provide. Senate Bill 301 by Senator Tillery of the 19th and others. Detainers, inmates charged with subsequent felony offenses under sentence and in custody, temporary custody provisions, revise. Senate Bill 306 by Senator C of the 34th and others. Audiology and speech language pathology interstate compact, enter into compact, licensing provisions, revise. Senate Bill 323 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others. Professions and businesses, patient protection measures, undergoing sedation in certain settings, provide. Senate Bill 333 by Senator Jackson II. Georgia Fatherhood Project, reducing crime and further engaging fathers to be better parents, enact. Senate Bill 350 by Senator James of the 35th and others. Property, restrooms and state properties providing feminine hygiene products, require. Senate Bill 372 by Senator Tillery of the 19th and others. Public health provisions, modernize, clarify, and update. Certain councils and committees, eliminate. Senate Bill 384 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others. Solid waste management, location of any municipal solid waste disposal facility within certain distance of a Blackwater River, flows directly into ocean, prohibit. Senate Bill 393 by Senator Strickland of the 17th and others. Law enforcement officers and agencies, duties and powers, revise. Campus policemen and other security personnel of the university system, arrest for felony offenses. Senate Bill 395 by Senator Watson of the 1st and others. County municipal hospital authorities, standards of indigency proceeds from the sales of lease a hospital by a hospital authority, revise. Senate Bill 407 by Senator Harper of the 7th and others. Forest resources and other plant life, harvest and sale of palmetto berries, regulate. Senate Bill 429 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others. Code Revision Commission, statutory portion of said code, revise, modernize, correct errors or omissions in, reenact. Senate Bill 435 by Senator Strickland of the 17th and others. The Debbie Vance Act, court imposing sentence may grant relief of vacatur for convictions and sentences to defendants, provide. Senate Resolution 644 by Senator Mullis of the 53rd and others. Georgia Building Authority, implementation of a workplace wellness program for the General Assembly and state agencies, urge. Senate Resolution 645 by Senator Mullis of the 53rd and others. Georgia Building Authority, implementation of a workplace wellness program for the General Assembly and state agencies, urge. Senate Resolution 717 by Senator Thompson, the 14th, and others. Trump, Donald, President of the United States, New North American Free Trade Agreement, recognized. Senate Resolution 722 by Senator Jordan of the 6th. Senate Comprehensive Approach to Family Leave Policies within State Government Study Committee, create. Senate Resolution 769 by Senator Stone, the 23rd, and others. Senate Domestic Violence Court Study Committee, create. Resolution 793 by Senator Beach of the 21st, and others. Joint Private Financing Infrastructure Study Committee, create. House Resolution 326 by Representative Houston of the 170th, and others. Roger C. Dill, Transportation Center, Tift County, dedicate. That completes the order, Mr. President.
All right, it's now time for the morning roll call. It is now time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Chair recognizes my good friend, the senator from the 31st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 16th for business elsewhere in the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 16th is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 2nd for business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 2nd is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 48th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senators from the 25th and the 26th for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senators from the 25th and 26th are excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 3rd for business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 3rd is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 55th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 43rd.
Without objection, the senator from the 43rd is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 14th. I'm sensing a pattern here.
Good morning, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 16th, business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 16th is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 8th.
Mr. President, I ask that you excuse the senator from the 47th.
Can you say the district one more time?
47th.
47th. Without objection, the senator from the 47th is excused. And last but not least, the chair recognizes the great senator from the 28th district.
Thank you, Mr. Great President. As for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 32nd for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 32nd is excused, and the senator from the 50th just realized he needed to excuse somebody also.
Mr. President, I'd like to request unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 52nd.
Without objection, the senator from the 52nd is excused. The secretary will call the roll. Senators, signify your presence by voting the yea switch. The secretary will unlock the machine. All right, it's now time for a morning devotional on this glorious Friday morning. Glorious, sunny Friday morning. I'd like to ask that all senators, please take your seats, cease all audible conversations, and I'd also like to ask our doorkeepers to secure the chamber at this time. It's my honor to recognize a senator from the 33rd District to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance and to introduce our chaplain of the day.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's do the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Georgia flag. I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag, to the principles of which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation. Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators, colleagues, friends, and y'all. I'm here today to introduce the pastor of the day, Reverend Sammy J. Dow. Reverend Dow is the senior pastor of Pleasant Grove Baptist Church in Marietta, Georgia, which is in the Crown, which is in the Crown County of the great state of Georgia. At the Grove, as it is affectionately known, Reverend Dow leads a growing and vibrant 2,000-member congregation in their vision of transforming lives. His ministry focuses on empowering people to reach their maximum potential in life, family, and work. Reverend Dow was licensed and ordained for gospel ministry by Mount Arad Baptist Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Under the leadership of Dr. William H. Curtis, he also served as a staff pastor at the Luke Church in Humboldt, Texas, under the leadership of Dr. Timothy W. Sloan. He previously served as the national director of the NAACP Youth College Division, the nation's largest organized group of youth activists with more than 20,000 members under the age of 25. During his tenure, the division experienced a significant % membership increase and engaged more than 8.5 million young people across the country on issues of various types. Reverend Dow is a subscribing Silver Life member of the NAACP, which reminds me I owe my membership dues, and a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Incorporated. He also serves as the at-large chaplain with the Cobb County Police Department. Reverend Dow is extremely fortunate to share his life with his wife and best friend, Dr. Jacqueline Dow, a public health research scientist and CEO of J. Dow Fitness, LLC. I now introduce to you Reverend Sammy Dow.
Good morning. Thank you all for this opportunity. There's a particularly interesting story found in the 21st chapter of the Gospel according to John. There's a story where the disciples have decided to go fishing following the resurrection of Jesus Christ. They are frustrated, they are bewildered, they are perplexed by all that has happened over the last several days of their lives. They've now made the decision to go fishing in the middle of the night because that was believed to be the best time to go fishing. However, after fishing all night, they come up with empty nets. It says that Jesus, a figure that they cannot identify, is standing on the shore. He cries out to them, "Friends, do you have any fish?" They say, "No, we don't have any fish." He says, "Well, pick your nets up, drop them on the right side of the boat, and you'll catch fish." They catch a full net of fish. In fact, the net was so full that even though the net was so full, it did not tear. The particularly interesting thing about this story is that the disciples were not supposed to be fishing for fish any longer. They had now been commissioned to become fishers of people. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments of life, we can never forget, we can never lose focus of what each of us has been called to do, to make life better for someone else, to remain consistent and resolute to the mission, the vision that we've been given for our lives, for the offices that we hold, for the state that we love. We have been called, even in the darkest of times, to ensure that we do everything we can to fill the nets of each and every resident of this great state. As you continue with your work today, your deliberations today, I hope that we will be found doing the opposite of what the disciples in this particular story are doing. Rather than running from the mission and the call that we've been given, we make ourselves ready, we make ourselves committed, we renew our commitment to filling the net that we have been given. But we don't fill the net for our own personal gain. We do so that we make our state better, we make communities better, we make the lives of our residents better, and ultimately we make the world better. If you would join me in standing across the chamber as we now bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this day that you have graced and gifted us. We are so grateful that you have chosen each of us for the various roles that we serve in and the seats that we hold. We ask that you would help us as we renew our focus and our commitment to ensuring that we do all that we can to fill the nets for those that we have been called to serve. Even in the darkest of moments, may frustration never cause us to walk away from the mission to which you have called us, to be fishers of men, fishers of women, boys, girls, children across this great state. We love you, we honor you, we thank you. We ask that this will continue to be a body that pushes forward an agenda that changes the trajectory of our state and ultimately improves the lives of as many people as we can. It is in your name that we pray, and we all say together, amen.
Great job, man. That was awesome. So the part that I never thought about in that story was the fact that they weren't called to be fishermen or to catch fish. They were fishermen, and so they had You know, when I keep learning more about the gospel every day. Wow, I think that's. Great job. Have a great weekend. Thanks, man. He's pretty good. How are you? He's right there. He's my chief of staff. Just tell him. He's hiding right there on the right side of that pole. Right over Randy Robbins. He'll get all the information. He's up front of yours. There's a 1% chance. A 1% chance that it's sold out. So it's Tennessee. Yeah, I am. I thought about that. Anyway, we were talking about some committees going up. You want to go? Hey. Are there any unanimous consents? The chair sees none. We're going to introduce the doctor of the day, and I'd like to call upon the senator from the 6th to do so.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am honored to introduce our doctor of the day, Dr. Nega Rusuli. Dr. Rusuli is an endocrinologist with Kaiser Permanente. She was born in Naples, Italy, and received her medical degree from the Tehran University of Medical Science. After graduating, she moved to the United States to complete her medical education, completing the residency in internal medicine at the Mount Sinai St. Luke's in New York, and an endocrinology fellowship at the University of Arkansas. She is board certified in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism. Please join me in welcoming our doctor of the day, Dr. Rusuli.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Jen Jordan, Mr. President, senators, and distinguished guests. And thank all of you for the warm welcome. It's an honor to be part of this great tradition and serve as a doctor of the day. It's also a privilege to serve the people of Georgia as a member of the Southeast Permanente Medical Group. While some of you may not be familiar with our practice, we are the largest physician-owned, physician-led medical group in Atlanta. I and the other 8 members of my group work with you, not an insurance company, to make your care decisions. That has been our model for more than 70 years, and I'm proud to be part of that tradition. I practice in the Kaiser Permanente at Cumberland and Sandy Spring medical offices. We have 26 locations across the metro area. I'm an endocrinologist, which is one of the 40 specialties who all work together to deliver care to over 300,000 individuals in Metro Atlanta and Athens. That number includes almost 40,000 state of Georgia employees and their dependents. We are also honored to care for almost 2,000 retired military service members and their families through our TRICARE program. Again, thank you for welcoming me here today.
We have some special guests with us today that we'd like to introduce. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the resolution?
Senate Resolution 557 by Senator C. of the 34th and others. A resolution commending Tony Phillips, Clayton County's Public Schools 2019-2020 Teacher of the Year, and for other purposes. Whereas Tony Phillips is a highly praised educator for Clayton County Public Schools, tirelessly directing an extraordinary amount of time and talent towards guiding students to a brighter future. Whereas Tony Phillips has earned distinction for teaching excellence as a result of her dedication to her students and her profession, and has been honored as Clayton County Public Schools 2019-2020 Teacher of the Year. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body commend Tony Phillips, Clayton County Public Schools 2019-2020 Teacher of the Year, and express their most sincere best wishes for continued success. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Chair would like to call upon the senator from the 34th to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Good news. Clayton County Public Schools Teacher of the Year, you all are about to meet. Today, I recognize Tony Phillips, Clayton County Public Schools 2019-2020 Teacher of the Year. Mrs. Phillips has a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Troy University in 2009. I don't know if you want me to tell all that. and a master's in elementary, at Hawthorne Elementary, the learning environment in Mrs. Phillips' classroom promotes safety first, organization, accountability, and responsibility. This is where her students soar. Organization, accountability, and responsibility, but they soar beyond expectation. The atmosphere is that of a sense of belonging. Mrs. Phillips was inspired by her first grade teacher to pursue teaching. It is with great pleasure that she opens up her classroom to not only her students, but also parents and educators. She believes that loving unconditionally, sacrificing freely, and giving wholeheartedly are the necessities of an effective teacher. Her motto is, if you plant the seed, there will be growth. Mrs. Phillips' students know that they are important, and she tells them that every single day. Mrs. Tony Phillips has earned distinction for teacher excellence as a result of her dedication to her students, to her profession, and has been honored at the Clayton County Public Schools 2019-2020 Teacher of the Year. Today, Mrs. Phillips shares this day with her husband, Mr. Charles Phillips. Raise your hand. They'll know you're the only man up here, but you. Dr. Cynthia James, principal at Hawthorne. Dr. Gloria Duncan, Clayton County Public Schools Director of Professional Learning. And I might add, Mr. President, in 1992, when I was first elected to the school board, Dr. Duncan was the principal at my children's school and was a force that helped me to gain that distinction of being elected the first African American to the Clayton County Board of Education. Anna Spellman-Knight, y'all know my Spellman-Knight. She was here yesterday with all her Spellman people. And Watona Lynch, educator at Hawthorne. I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege only because at Hawthorne, my daughter, who gave me my very first grandson and my last grandson, is assistant principal at Hawthorne, and I have to shout her out since I'm here and she's family. So I wanted to make that known as well. Mr. President, I want Mrs. Phillips to come up and say a word or two.
Is it good? Okay. Good morning. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Senator C for allowing me to come in. The biggest thing I want to say is that educating the children that I'm able to be in contact with daily, I don't see it as a job, but I see it as a calling and such a great opportunity to pour into their lives and prepare them to be successful citizens. So with that being said, I'm thankful for God gifting me with this calling. It's not a job, but it's a calling that I walk into every day. Thank you so much.
Let me just take this opportunity to thank Mrs. Phillips for all that she does for the children of Clayton County, and congratulations to you this morning.
Great job. Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Chair recognizes the senator from the 45th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, happy Friday! Is that not a good thing to have? We look forward to an exciting weekend, especially before we all qualify on Monday morning. So today, I wish you safe travels home and your families are safe and have a great weekend. But before you go, I would like to welcome to the Georgia State Senate a beautiful group of Cardinals over here to the right. And it's my honor to be a member of this group, and this is the Georgia Republican Women Federation. And I believe the correct title is Federation of Georgia Republican Women. I want to make sure I get that right. But they truly are the backbone of the Republican Party in Georgia, and it's my honor to be a member of that group. And historically, whether you're Democrat or Republican, and you look at parties, not just in Georgia, but across the United States, it's women who really form the foundation. It's women who go to bat for everybody. And most importantly, they go to bat for the most vulnerable citizens, especially here in the state of Georgia. And they do the legwork. They do the legwork that nobody else wants to do, but is the most important part of winning in elections. So it's absolutely my honor to have them here at the Georgia State Capitol. They come every year. They are a valuable source of information, and I know that my caucus in particular, we welcome to the state capitol, and we are so proud of them. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you, and I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. All right, you've got a consent calendar of privileged resolutions before you. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? For what purpose is the senator from the 36th? We've already moved on to the consent calendar. Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for extending the courtesy as I was late on my button. Good morning, colleagues. I'm so pleased to recognize guests that we have in the balcony today from the Multi-Agency Alliance for Children. It's located all across Atlanta, and it serves children and youth who are some of the state's most vulnerable children. The Multi-Agency Alliance for Children, known as MAC, contracts with our state DFACs to provide a continuum of care for those at-risk children and their families. I really can't emphasize enough the difference that this organization makes. There are almost a dozen provider agencies that serve children that came together to work effectively to remove the silos and to do the very best to deliver services. Twin Cedars, Devereaux, Hillside, Youth Villages, Goshen Valley, Elks Aid, more, the Baptist Homes for Children and Youth, the Methodist Home, Creative Community Services, and Chris 180, which is a close neighbor of mine across the county line in DeKalb. All of the youth that are impacted by child serving systems receive coordinated care and support to experience permanency and well-being. The lives of some very precious young people are in the hands of these providers, and I want to ask them to stand, thank them for their collaboration, coordination, engaging with youth, planning for great outcomes for our next generation. Would the representatives of the Multi-Agency Alliance for Children please rise and be recognized? Welcome. these are folks that both the youth and the providers that work hand in hand for excellence. We appreciate you so much and welcome you to the Capitol. I will take the remaining time to revisit the discussion we barely had launched yesterday, and that is about the elevators and escalators in our MARTA system. Throughout the MARTA system, there are 38 rail stations, 116 elevators, and 150 escalators. What we might not realize as consumers is that there is an incredible renovation and rehabilitation underway with MARTA right now. The majority of these elevators and escalators are 36 to 40 years old, and the average lifespan of one is 25 years old. But MARTA has been awarded a $217 million contract to maintain and rehab these 111 elevators and escalators. MARTA is working to improve. Rehab has been done on 29% of the elevators and 16% of the escalators. They wish to work hand in hand with the genuine and well-founded concerns to have wonderfully clean, efficient, and effective and operating escalators and elevators. We can revisit this at another time. My time is up. Thank you, and have a great weekend.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to recognize the Atlanta Track Club. You may know that they are putting on the Olympic Marathon Trials here in Atlanta tomorrow. And for those of you who were here for the Olympics in 1996, you may also want to know that the Olympic torch is going to be lit again, the first time since 1996, tomorrow between 12 and 3 at the stadium at Georgia State. So best of luck to all the athletes, and congratulations to the Atlanta Track Club. You can also watch this on national TV. Thank you. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today is the last day of this legislative session that we will be able to remember Black History Month. So I want to reflect on Georgia's first Black elected congressman, Jefferson Franklin Long. Born a slave in Knoxville County in 1836, by the end of the Civil War, he became a businessman and tailor in Macon, Georgia. He was elected Georgia's first Black congressman in 1869. His first and only speech in Washington, D.C. was opposing the offer of amnesty for Confederate officers who fought to keep Blacks enslaved across the South. A congressman for 3 months, his time was short, but his impact is still remembered today because he stood up for the rights of the oppressed. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Now we will move on to the consent calendar of privileged resolutions that are before you. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Chair sees none. Is there objection to the adoption of the resolutions on the consent calendar? The chair hears none, and the resolutions on the consent calendar are adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw and commit? Chair sees none. You have a consent calendar of local bills before you now. Mr. Secretary, are there any objections filed to any bill on the local consent calendar?
Mr. President, there are no objections filed.
Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the Committee on State and Local Government, which is favorable to the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. The question is on the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar, the yeas are 46, the nays are 2, and the bills having received the requisite constitutional majority are therefore passed. We are going to move on to the rules calendar. We're going to move on to the rules calendar. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 362?
Senate Bill number 362 by Senator Wilkinson of the 50th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 4 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to livestock running at large or straying so as to change the fees for impounding animals and disposing of impounded animals, provide for an effective date and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 11th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Consumer Affairs recommends that this bill do pass. Respectively submitted by Senator Wilkinson, Chair. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 50th to speak to Senate Bill 362.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I do know it's Friday morning, but I'm going to try to give you just enough explanation about this. There have been some questions about this bill, and I wanted you to understand a little bit about it. Doesn't have anything to do with dogs, so we can stop that. The sheriff in every county has the right by state law to impound animals if they are neglected or if they've been a safety hazard. Now, the particular incident that brought this to my attention and motivated me to introduce this legislation is a county in my district where you had an absentee landowner who had Asian water buffaloes in their pasture. These Asian water buffaloes are very large animals and they have a very big appetite. So the water buffaloes were getting in the neighbors' yards, and I know this sounds really funny, but you know, they're also getting out in the middle of the roadway at night, which is a real safety hazard if you run up on one of them. So the sheriff, the county did not have the facilities to impound the animals, but because of the safety of the citizens, they impounded the animals. There was a neighbor who had a catch pen where they could put the animals. So the animals were impounded for 45 days. Now, when you impound the animals, you have to give the owner of the animals the right to come and claim the animal and pay the cost. If they do not do that, which the owner of the animals did not do, then you have to run notice of sale in the legal organ and go through the legal process to dispose of the animals, which they did after 45 days. So when they sold the animals, by law it requires that the money goes into the fines and forfeiture account in the county. So they were limited by law, because this is an old law, that the maximum amount of money they could pay the person who had kept the animals was $5 per day for feed. I don't think that this law hadn't been updated in a number of years. Of course, it costs the person who was accommodating the sheriff a lot more than $5 a day to feed the animals. And when they sold them at the livestock auction barn, they sold for enough money and much more to reimburse the person, but they were limited by law to only giving them $5 per day, and the rest of the money went in the fines and forfeiture account. So the sheriff asked me, in the interest of safety and in fairness, when they are required to impound animals, to kind of update these fees and make it more in line with the actual cost. So that's Senate Bill 362. I'd ask for your favorable consideration. It passed the committee unanimously. There were not any questions about it. And Mr. President, if there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
Senator, you have a question from your good friend, the senator from the 28th.
Okay.
Chair recognizes the good friend from the 28th Senate District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I will.
Now, I'm no Asian water or buffalo expert, but I would think it would cost more than $25 per day. So if we're trying to get cost, why are we capping it at 25?
That's just what the sheriff recommended. He said that, we didn't want to be exorbitant. He felt like that would take care of it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Do you continue to yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 19th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does Senator yield?
I will.
So if I'm understanding correctly, Mr. Chairman, what's happening here is the counties are ending up with damages because they're holding animals, correct?
Well, it's actually the person that's costing money is the caretaker for the animals.
So is the county incurring the cost at the end?
What they're doing is disposing of the animals. When they dispose of the animals, in the situation that I'm talking about here, the water buffaloes, there was more than enough revenue generated to pay the cost if they'd been legally able to. Now, when they dispose of the animals, if it's not enough, the county does incur that cost.
So all this really does is lets the county recoup the actual cost that they have for the damages they received, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Senator, you have no more questions.
Thank you. I urge a favorable vote.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair sees none. Is there objection or agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 50, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 371.
Senate Bill number 371 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 2 of Title 32 of the OCGA relating to officers in the Department of Transportation. So as to provide for state investment in railways and railroad facilities and equipment, to provide for a definition, to provide that the Commissioner of Transportation may administer a Georgia Freight Railroad program and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 20th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Transportation recommends that this bill do pass by substitute, respectively submitted by Senator Beach of the 21st chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Transportation offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 371. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 2 of Title 32 of the OCGA relating to officers in the Department of Transportation, so as to provide for state investment in railways and railroad facilities and equipment. To provide for definition, to provide that the Commissioner of Transport may administer a Georgia Freight Railroad program, to provide for subprograms or for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 51st to speak to Senate Bill 371.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I bring to you today SB 371. I don't have to sit up here and tell you what you already know, but Georgia has been very successful in many, many aspects. #1 state to do business for many, many years. One of the reasons for that is our enormous investment in transportation. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars at the Savannah Port over the last 7 to 10 years. We continue to see that investment create huge returns on investment. The Savannah Port is the 4th largest port in our country for volume. It's one of the fastest growing ports in the nation. We continue to import and export goods not only into Georgia but through Georgia. With that comes congestion, a lot of trucks on our highways and interstates. Therefore, we need to continue to work on finding ways to relieve that congestion. One of the ways we've done that, last year we created a joint commission on freight and logistics. That commission is chaired by the transportation chairman in the Senate and the transportation chairman over in the House. We spent the first year looking at the issues around our state. We've developed a good sense of where the problems are. Now we're looking at how to solve some of those problems. This commission will be extended for an additional year. This bill tags along with that effort. 2 years ago, the previous senator from the 48th passed this identical piece of legislation. All this bill does is creates a framework for the logistics plan and the rail plan to be implemented by the DOT. It does not have any funds earmarked with it in our budget. That would be done in future years to come. And we need to develop a plan, and we need to be able to upgrade our infrastructure for our rail. Short line is a big must. We put money into rail programs every year in our budget through bonds for our short lines, but we have to do much, much more. Many of y'all have come to us in the past talking about railroad crossings in our state and a lot of the long waits at those crossings in your small towns. These are just some of the things that we'll be looking at over the next 2 years. And this piece of legislation will help the DOT to help address those issues as well. With that, Mr. President, I'm happy to take questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 21st for a
Senator Yield.
question.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true that we are doing a joint study committee on freight and logistics?
Senator,
and this-
please suspend for a moment. We've got a short calendar today. We started early, but that doesn't give us an excuse not to pay attention.
Thank you,
Let's
Mr.
give the
President.
senator in the well the respect he deserves.
Yeah, Senator
Proceed.
Yield. Isn't it true that we are doing a freight and logistics study committee, a joint one with the House, to look at rail and infrastructure and investment? And
the
this will help?
senator knows of which he speaks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I sure do.
Senator, I direct your attention to lines 32 through 34, where we talk about the expenditure of state funds and what you have to do before spending state funds. Why would we not need to have the commissioner consult the Georgia State Finance and Investment Commission?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator, and I'll just tell you that the DOT board listens to their in-house consultation. They have in-house lawyers that look at all of the contracts before any contract is executed, before any public funds are given out. And if there's a question about the gratuities clause, as you point out in this section of the law, then it would go to the Attorney General's office. I'm not aware of any time that we've had to go to the agency that you're referring to, but thank you for that question.
Thank you, sir.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. The gentleman will yield.
Yes, sir, I would.
How does one get appointed to this commission?
The commission was appointed by the Lieutenant Governor, and the House of Representatives allows the Speaker to appoint the chairs. But the legislation that we passed last year to create the commission, you voted for, I believe. So that was already done and adopted.
Well, what I'm interested in is serving on that commission since Middle Georgia and a lot of that freight and stuff is coming through the Middle Georgia area, so we need to be prepared for it.
Yes, sir, you do. Thank you. We'd love to have you on that commission, Senator.
You have no more questions.
Thank you all.
Does any other senator wish to speak to Senate Bill 371? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 50, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 388?
Senate Bill number 388 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 7 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to general income tax provisions so as to increase penalties imposed for certain actions relating to false or fraudulent material matter on returns, affidavits, claims, or documents. Provide that such actions must be taken knowingly to be unlawful and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 24th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Stone of the 23rd chair. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th to speak to Senate Bill 388.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I've got truly a very simple bill. This does one thing. The problem that it addresses is we have a cottage industry in this state of people that assist other people in filing false and fraudulent tax returns. And the reason that continues to happen in Georgia is the most that people that engage in that behavior can be charged with is a misdemeanor. This bill comes to you from the Department of, the Commissioner of the Department of Revenue, in where they're asking that it simply be changed from a misdemeanor to a felony, but to protect people and the possibility, or to protect against, to make sure that folks that engage in this, the standard is added on line 14 that they must prove that they knowingly and willfully assisted someone in filing a false and fraudulent tax return. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I'll yield the will.
You have a couple of questions. Do you yield?
Yes, I yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 15th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
Senator, you mentioned line 14. On line 16, after which is false or fraudulent as to any material matter, whether or not the falsity or fraud is with the knowledge or consent, whether you know it or not, look like you're getting caught up in a legal trap there some kind of way. Can you explain that to me?
Sure, Senator. Excuse me. I don't think that creates a trap. The reason that language is added, if you put that, what's added on line 16 in context, excuse me, Senator, with line 15 right above it, is that with respect to what's unlawful, excuse me, let me go back to line 14, I think is a place to begin, that the person must be proved to knowingly and willfully assist in a procedure. Thank you. Counsel or advise in the preparation of or presentation of a return, affidavit, claim, or document. And if you notice, Senator, the words false and fraudulent are stricken from line 15, and what is added in line 16, which is a false or fraudulent as to any material matter. So this is actually written more tightly than the original language, so that instead of saying a false and fraudulent return, it has to be a false and fraudulent return as to a material matter. and that protects someone from accidentally making them, helping someone perhaps do the math and the math was wrong or something that was not material. So the way this is structured and the way this is written with those two additions, that addition plus the addition of knowingly, you're going to have, the only people that will be able to be prosecuted for this is someone who knowingly assists someone that is filing a fraudulent tax return of material matters, not just incidental facts, but materially false of material matters in the tax return.
Senator Further Yield.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain material for me? That means they gave a document that's not factual, or what bothers me is it seems that the person didn't know. They didn't know that it was false, but they filed what was given to them. So how does that?
Okay, and I now I understand the question, Senator, and I appreciate it. This doesn't go after the tax filer. This goes after the person that helped someone prepare a false tax return. Okay. So yeah, this statute would be used to go after someone assisting someone else in the filing of their tax return, but their work is false and fraudulent.
And lastly, Senator.
Yes, sir.
The $10,000, what is it currently? It's $1,000. Why the huge leap from 1,000 to 10,000? Fine-wise, I believe it is.
Well, it's not more than 10,000, Senator. It doesn't go to a minimum of it shall not be fined more than 10,000 or imprisoned for not less than a year. The reason for that, Senator, is the problem is folks that are getting caught engaging in this type behavior that's defrauding our government and the rest of us, they get slapped with a $100 fine or something like that, and it's a misdemeanor, and they just keep doing it. So they're making so much money doing this, it's not enough of a penalty to stop them.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the questions.
Do you continue to yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I do.
My question is there an amount that's associated with this potential crime?
An amount associated with a potential fine?
Well, with your statute change here, is there an amount above which you have to be to get a felony?
Senator, I don't understand the question. An amount in what regard?
So the crime here is to knowingly assist in or procure, counsel, or advise in the preparation of a false tax return and in a material way. Is there a minimal amount of money involved in that scheme that we are prosecuting, or can it be any amount?
I think under this it could be any amount.
So if I defrauded somebody $5, I could theoretically, under this statute, be charged with a felony, correct?
Well, you're not defrauding somebody $5. You're defrauding the government out of money. You're knowingly and willfully doing it. You're filing or helping someone file a false and fraudulent return that's not on any issue, but it has to be as to a material matter.
Yes,
and
sir.
If in fact you're doing that, then yes, you ought to suffer the penalty, and that should be a felony.
Sir, I appreciate that, and I have prosecuted these kinds of crimes at the federal level, but I just wanted to be very clear for the record that this is any amount of fraud, we don't have a tiered system here or anything like that, correct?
There's not, and as you know, Senator, and we do know you're a former federal prosecutor. Thank you. I think we've heard that before. As you know, with lots of criminal statutes or statutes like this that carry a criminal penalty, you don't always tier it.
That's right.
It is, you are trying to deter the wrongful and fraudulent conduct, and it is the conduct that is wrongful, not the amount that the government is being defrauded from.
Yes, sir, I appreciate your acknowledgement of my experience, and we may disagree on this bill, but I do want to make sure it's clear for the record so that the people of Georgia understand what we're doing here. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Senator, continue to yield?
Sure.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Leader, do you yield?
I do.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, do you yield?
Yes, I do.
I was wondering if you could paint a picture for me more about what this cottage industry looks like and what the behavior of the cottage industry is that's working towards defrauding the state. Are they doing it knowingly to the tax filer particularly, or is the tax filer often unaware? That's question number one. And question number two kind of dovetails on that, which is how many current or how many average cases are there in a typical year that are prosecuted under the current misdemeanor law?
Good question, Senator. I don't have a number for you of the number of these type of cases that are prosecuted every year. I don't have that. I can be happy to get that for you later. But the type of cases, these are folks that either engage with people that are looking to defraud the government in ways of filing fraudulent tax returns. Whether or not the typical case involves them approaching someone or them being approached because they've heard that they'll do this, I don't know that. I don't know the typical case like that. I just know that the Department of Revenue says it is a problem, and quite frankly, under the statute that we have now, being a misdemeanor and being fined a few $100s, I'm given to understand that the windfall, the illegal windfall and the ill-gotten gain for people that engage in this is significant, and the few $100 fine simply is not enough to deter them. Thank you.
Senator, continue to yield.
I will yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had wanted to ask some questions, but since the senator yielded the well, I'm just going to kind of bring your attention to some issues with the bill. Specifically, with respect to line 17, it indicates that the person authorized or required to present the return. That's kind of what you want to look at with respect there. And in terms of that, it says they don't even have to know that the fact, the return, the document is false or fraudulent, okay? They don't even have to know that the information is false to subject them to this statute. Now, it's unclear exactly who would get brought into that, but I can tell you that with respect to the person who's assisting with the tax return, who's counseling, all of that kind of stuff, that actually is that the person required here. And so if you don't even have to have knowledge that what you're doing or what you're presenting is false, that's a problem with respect to a felony, right? So if I have a client who gives me information and I don't even know it's false, but then I then share it or present it or file it, and I willingly file it and I willingly send it to DOR, then I can be subject to a felony conviction. Okay, that's number one. Number two, with respect to this whole idea of tiering in the statute, if you actually look at the rest of the statute, we do tier with respect to this violation, and specifically in terms of OCGA 48-7-5, with respect to the taxpayer, where there is a willful evasion of paying taxes, which would include presenting fraudulent information and the like. You're not even subject to a felony conviction until you defraud the federal government or don't pay taxes at the level of $3,000. So anybody below $3,000 that's defrauding the government isn't subject to a felony conviction. But I'll tell you this, anybody who's assisting that person at H&R Block down the road who may be presenting false information where maybe you have $5 that's coming out of the DOR's pocket, they are going to be subject to a felony conviction. The language is not clear here. It doesn't make sense that we would actually punish someone who didn't even know that the information was false, subject them possibly to prison time and to major fines when we don't even do that with the taxpayer who is defrauding the government. So with respect to that, if this is such a big issue, then this language needs to be clearer, it needs to be cleaned up, and at a minimum, the person who is actually defrauding the government should be subject to the same violation. I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Chair recognizes the senator from the 22nd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to bring to attention that, and one of the questions that I was going to ask It's just that when we say that a person might come in continually over and over and all they're going to get is a $100 fine, they also have the opportunity also to be placed in incarceration in jail. It is if it's currently a misdemeanor, you still can get 12 months up to confinement. So the idea that a judge would see someone come in over and over and over and only give them a $100 fine and that they're part of this cottage industry and not say, well, wait a minute here, I'm going to go ahead and incarcerate you for 12 months. The ability to incarcerate that person is there even under a misdemeanor. So that was one of the questions I was going to ask. Was that ability still there? And the answer is absolutely yes. And it's really unfathomable to think that a judge would sit there and see someone come in over and over and say, all I'm going to do is give you a $100 fine or even a $1,000 fine. At some point, the judge is going to say, you're going to the county jail for a period of 12 months. So that's my point I wanted to ask, Mr. President, and I yield the will.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other chair recognizes the senator from the 10th to speak to the measure?
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of this body. It's always a good idea to follow several attorneys up here in the well. But I just want to give you a different perspective on what I think a layperson would look at in this particular bill, which I don't think is very positive. First of all, over on line 14, it talks about a person being prosecuted, and we know that there are a lot of criminal companies out there and other entities that are just as responsible for propagating these kind of crimes as certain individuals are. I don't see any mention of prosecuting companies that perpetuate these kind of crimes. And had the chairman from the 18 stayed in the well, I would have asked him about that particular question as well. The other issue in here in this bill that I find is extremely troubling is that we are now taking an offense that once was a misdemeanor, we are now classifying that offense as a felony. And I'm not an attorney, but I know somewhere between a misdemeanor and a felony, there's something known as a high and aggravated misdemeanor that we certainly could have stepped up to rather than going all the way up to making this particular crime a felony. And had the senator from the 18 stood in the well and taken questions, I was going to ask him about that particular issue as well. I think the question was asked, how large of a problem is this? The response that was given is, we really don't know. And I would hope that this body, before it passes legislation like this that criminalizes, creates another felony in our statute, that we should be given some data how large of a problem this is from Department of Revenue. If they in fact says a problem, then they should have the data on how large of a problem this particular issue is and what kind of action would be required to remedy that particular situation. So I see a lot of pitfalls in this particular bill that could entrap some people without really entrapping the organizations that's behind it, that's pushing these kind of issues out there in our public. And I would certainly hope that we would take a pause and give us an opportunity to look at this data. I didn't have the good fortune of sitting on the committee where this bill came through, so this is the only opportunity I have to ask the author of this legislation about these particular issues. But from a layperson, business person perspective, I would hope that we would take pause on this bill and before we try and create this new statute of a felony on our books. And if there aren't any questions, because I'm certainly willing to take some, I'll yield the well.
Sir, you have questions. Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. But gentlemen, yield.
Absolutely.
What happens with a taxpayer who has filed deductions on their income tax and then the Department of Revenue or the IRS denies those deductions?
Senator,
in other words, you're in business and you file deduction. You might file gasoline, your travel back and forth. But then you are questioned about the deductions that you put in, and therefore, if those deductions are ruled that you can't do it, is that a fraudulent?
No, Senator, that isn't fraudulent. We would certainly get under that kind of scenario. There would be an audit that would take place, and the Revenue Department would ask for additional documentation from any entity in that regard, by the way, and they would give that entity an opportunity to work it out. And if they could not bring forth that documentation that was required, then they would deny that deduction. They would not lock them up. They would not give them a felony. They would not haul them off to jail from 1 to 5 years. They would more than likely fine them and make them pay a penalty.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 45th for a question.
Would the senator yield?
Absolutely.
Senator, can you tell me if in your area, I know we're kind of close to each other, that if in the neighborhoods or in the communities that people kind of have a network of, they know who to go to get certain procurement of certain activities. Do you know that anything about that, that someone, you know, might be an expert on taxes and you go here? Do you know about that?
Senator, I do not, and I would certainly hope that anyone who would go to a proposed expert would have some letters or initials at the end of their name, like CPA and organizations like that that have been certified to prepare taxes and not deal with some layperson in the community.
Would you further yield?
Absolutely.
Is it not true when you're elderly and you know you don't really, you're getting older and you really need help, that in the community that sometimes people know in the neighborhoods who to go to, and that people help out with taxes? I know I'm a former mayor, and people would know people in the neighborhood to go to, and they weren't a CPA, they weren't an accountant, they weren't trained in taxes, but they would just regularly go and ask them questions. Is that not true?
Senator, that I think you certainly know of which you speak. That certainly could be true.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too had a question for the author that I didn't get to ask, so I just thought I'd raise the question here now. One of the things I'm curious about with regards to this bill is, what does our current enforcement scheme actually look like? How many investigators do we have at DOR? Do they have the resources that they need to actually find and go after the tax cheats? Because I'm certainly aware that with some of our government agencies and fraud that is illegal but is not caught or captured within various agencies, both at the federal and state level, one of the limitations of that is the number of investigators and the budget that we are presenting for that agency to be able to even locate, isolate, and go after wrongdoers in the first place. So the reason I'm raising that issue is this may be one aspect of trying to crack down on cottage industries that are defrauding our state. But another big aspect to me that I think needs to be a part of this conversation is, what are the resources even devoted in the first place to sussing out and going after these wrongdoers? So, you can say when we find them, we're going to throw them in jail for longer. We're going to fine them for longer. But to me, at a more basic level, we need to know, are we even able to find them in the first place? What percentage of tax fraud or within this cottage industry do we even think that we're able to capture in the first place? Which to me is a much more fundamental question than who you catch, how much you're going to fine them, or how long they're going to be in prison for. Can we at the most basic level even do our job as a state, as an agency, at locating these individuals to begin with? And that, I think, is much more important than, because as the senator from the 22nd pointed out, you can already imprison people under this. So I need those questions answered before I can feel comfortable about why we're moving forward on this, versus even having the basic answers about the level of enforcement that's needed and what's currently being able to be done with the resources given to the department. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. We have a couple of amendments, and would ask the secretary to read amendment number 1.
Senators Tiller of the 19th, Stone of the 23rd, Kennedy of the 18th, and Strickland of the 17th offer the following amendment number 1 to amend Senate Bill 388 by adding the word "said person knows" following the word "which" on line 16. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair calls upon the senator from the 19th to speak to his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. This amendment, Amendment Number 1, I mean it to be a friendly amendment. I think it is to the author. All it tries to do is take the knowingly requirement that you see in line 14 and make sure that that applies to knowing that the document is false if we're going to make this a felony. I think it actually helps us with drafting. It gets clearer on the meaning and makes sure that someone's not accidentally charged or indicted for knowingly preparing or knowingly assisting without necessarily knowing that the document itself was false. I think it has support of the author of the bill, and I'd ask your favorable consideration. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Mr. Secretary, will you read Amendment Number 2?
Senator Jordan of the 6th offers the following Amendment Number 2 to amend Senate Bill 388 by striking the words whether or not the falsifier or fraud is on line 16 by inserting the words and is submitted to the Department of Revenue on line 16 after the word matter by striking lines 17 and 18. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th to speak to Amendment Number 2.
With respect to this amendment, basically what we're trying to do is just leave in the knowingly and willful and let that be with respect to the affidavit, the claim, or the document. And so if we just strike out all of that language in terms of whether or not the falsity or fraud is with the knowledge or consent of the person authorized or required to present the return, affidavit, claim, or document, then it basically cleans it up in terms of what was presented, and we just take out kind of existing law, and then we know that it actually has to do with knowingly and willfully knowing that it's a false document or not. Also, I've put in there and is submitted to the Department of Revenue the idea that it's a return, affidavit, claim, or document. I'm not sure that's as broad as the plan of salvation in terms of document and everything else dealing with taxes and stuff. So with respect to that, I think that it actually needs to be submitted to the Department of Revenue so that it actually, then the Department of Revenue relies on that to their detriment, and then there's an actual fraud that takes place. If there's just a document that exists with a falsity in it in somebody's office randomly, and that could subject them to a felony conviction, then that doesn't make sense to me. I think that the prior code language was not clear, and I think that we can actually clean it up by just striking a lot of that out. Thank you.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senator wish to speak for what purpose is Senator from the 45th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, could we suspend just for a minute till we get these amendments on our desk so that we can examine them?
Stand at ease for a moment. Secretary's office is putting those on the desks as we speak. Thank you. All right, we'll come back to order. We have another amendment that has arrived, and call on the senator from the 10th to speak to amendment number 3. Amendment number 3.
Senator Jones of the 10th offered the following amendment number 3 to Senate Bill 388. Line 14 after person, insert the language or corporate officer or board member. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The chair recognizes the senator from the 10th to speak to.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this amendment is kind of self-explanatory, and I know there are some loose definitions out there for persons that some of these legal minds are aware of, but I just wanted to clarify this issue, that if any person be subjected to a particular felony, then I believe members of corporations and even board members should be subjected as well. Thank you, and I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. All right, we'll come back to order, and while we distribute amendment number 3, we'll start to take up amendments 1 and 2. Does any other members wish to speak to the amendments? Chair sees none. For what purpose does the senator from the 18th rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to table SB 388.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, and Senate Bill 388 is tabled. Moving right along. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption to Senate Resolution 690?
Senate Resolution number 690 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others. A resolution encouraging the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund and other entities to support implementation of the Coastal Georgia Greenway and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 11th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment recommends that this resolution pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Harper, Chair. Mr. President, the Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment offers the following substitute Senate Resolution 690, resolution encouraging the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Fund, Trust Fund, and other entities to support the implementation of Coastal Georgia Greenway and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 1st to speak to Senate Resolution 690.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm here to present Senate Resolution 690. The Coastal Georgia Greenway is a 155-mile continuous multi-trail that follows U.S. Highway 17 and other corridors across southeastern Georgia from Florida to South Carolina. It traverses parts of 6 coastal counties: Camden, Glenn, McIntosh, Liberty, Bryan, and Chatham. These trails take its travelers to different towns, recreational areas, historic areas, cultural sites, and waterways. In addition, the Coastal Georgia Greenway is linked to the 200 miles of connector trails and to 7 barrier islands. It is part of a larger East Coast Greenway that stretches from Maine down to Florida, 2,900 miles. In Georgia, it's 155 miles that we have in our great state. This resolution encourages the Department of Natural Resources and the Stewardship Trust Fund to allocate funds annually to support the implementation and construction of this Coastal Georgia Greenway. Mr. President, I'll yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senator wish to speak to Senate Resolution 690? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution by substitute. All those in favor of the resolution will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the resolution by substitute, the yeas are 43, the nays are 8. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted by substitute.
I lost my phone. What is Mindy?
Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. 2 March 2020.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the announcements?
Rules will meet upon adjournment in 4:50 cap. Insurance and Labor Subcommittee on SB 415 will meet after Rules Committee meeting in 4:50 cap. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 4th for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Appropriations Committee, we will be meeting Monday morning, 8 o'clock and 341 to pass out the amended budget. So I know it's Monday and it's the start of a week, but we've got to get started so we can pass it out Monday and then vote on it on the floor on Wednesday. Please be there at 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes the senator from Ocilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, as you know, the last 2 years we have had a House-Senate kickball game. The senator from the 9th and myself are the Senate team captains this year, and so if you're interested in joining the senator from the 53rd with us on the kickball field this year, and it will be a sight to behold, you can join us on March 18th at 5 o'clock at Georgia State Stadium. So please mark that date, mark the time, and let the senator from the 9th or myself know if you want to join us on the team. Aides and staff and interns are also invited to participate. We look forward to a good time, and we'll keep you posted on more details as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll yield the will.
How about lieutenant governors? Are they invited?
The lieutenant governor and his staff is invited as well, and we look forward to having your pitching skills on the field.
I'm pretty good
Mr. President.
underhand with a kickball. That's good. Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th for an announcement.
We have the Fulton delegation meeting, noon, Coverdale Legislative Office Building, 307. Lunch will be served. Anybody that represents Fulton County, love to see you there.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 44th.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me just recognize some seniors from DeKalb County, my district. They were not here when we did points of personal privilege. Miss Vivian Moore and that group, I think they boarded the bus at the YMCA, YWCA this morning, and they wanted to see the legislative process. Welcome to the Georgia State Senate. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes the senator for the 34th.
I just wanted to thank you all, colleagues, for indulging me for Go Red this month. We didn't do the Go Red because we were out of session, and I am in red to end this month, so I just wanted to make it clear why I was wearing my red today. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, the majority leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until Monday, March 2nd, 2020 at 10 a.m. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. And the ayes clearly have it. The Senate stands adjourned. Have a great weekend.